Hello and welcome back to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm very excited to share today's conversation with you. One topic that we've returned to frequently on this podcast is a discussion about the global depopulation agenda. We've discussed the Kissinger Report, otherwise known as NSSM 200, which was the United States' official depopulation strategy put in place in 1974 and never officially rescinded. We've also talked about how the U.S. government would use U.S. aid and foreign aid to push a pro-abortion, pro-contraception, pro-LGBTQ ideology in developing nations. This is a topic that I find fascinating because I'd never heard about it before I started working here at HLI, and it's really helpful for understanding how anti-family ideology spread so rapidly abroad, what role the U.S. government played in this, and also why HLI's mission in resisting this anti-family ideological colonization is so important. On today's episode, Father Shenan Boquet and I discuss the U.S. government's new global health strategy, which hopefully appears to be moving away from the pro-abortion, pro-contraception ideology and into providing actual authentic healthcare. So on today's episode, Father and I discuss this new strategy and what it could mean for the future of foreign aid. And Father Boquet also gives some insight into what he'd like to see from foreign aid based on his mission travels abroad. It's a really interesting conversation. Obviously, Father, having visited nearly 100 countries, brings a really unique perspective on having seen both the good things that the U.S. government has brought to developing nations, as well as the evils that have been imposed by the anti-family ideologies. So I really hope that you enjoy it. One thing that I would like to say before we begin is that because of Father's mission travels, we had to film this episode a few weeks ago before the U.S. government announced its Mexico City policy expansion. So since then, the Trump administration has announced that they are expanding the Mexico City policy to cut off funding for NGOs providing and promoting abortion abroad, as well as radical gender ideology abroad, which is great news. I believe it made the Mexico City policy about 3 times bigger. So anyway, I just wanted to explain the reason that Father and I don't talk about that at all is because at the time of filming, we hadn't heard about it. Without further ado, please welcome Father Boquet to Living a Culture of Life. Welcome back to the podcast, Father.
As always, a great blessing to be with you, Colleen, especially in between our mission trips. Always a blessing.
And all the travel that you've had for the holidays and all of that as well. So, yeah.
Already anticipating what the new year will look like. We have a busy 2026 on the horizon.
You have a lot of mission trips coming up, right?
Yes. It seems, we just last fall, we had our summit meeting with our regional director, international team of directors. Mm-hmm. And as a result, along with our affiliates in the various countries, there's just a great excitement. People are getting back to the busyness of promoting programs and training workshops and seminars. So it's 2026 seems to set itself, if it all happens, to be a very busy year, in which will make that year pass very quickly.
Wonderful. Well, we'll miss you here in the office, but I'm glad that you're able to get out in the mission field. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, today's topic actually ties directly into our mission field because I wanted to discuss the United States' new approach to foreign aid, particularly in the realm of healthcare. And this was something that I was made aware of in November. It looks like the original document was from September, and we hadn't had a chance to address it yet. So I kind of just wanted to sit down with you today and just discuss what this looks like and what this could mean for the promotion of life and family around the world. Okay. Because you and I have had lots of conversations about the Kissinger Report and how the U.S. has funded all these anti-life NGOs that then go and spread contraception, abortion, and gender ideology. And to me, it seems like the Trump administration is trying to pivot away from that approach. So that to me seems like a good plan, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, it would be good, as we've talked about in our podcast several times, mm-hmm. is, for our readership and listeners today, is to familiarize themselves. What does the church teach about healthcare? Mm-hmm. And here again, I would guide people to the Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare Services, mm-hmm. which is a document promulgated by the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, and who just released the 7th edition mm-hmm. with updates on various current medical bioethical issues. Mm-hmm. And there, why I'm addressing it and raising it up is so that because each of the introductions, Colleen, give the mindset of how the church envisions healthcare. Mm-hmm. And because we're starting with a principle, social principle, doctrine principle, the dignity of the human person, mm-hmm. and because everything begins with our understanding of the human person, and all of our actions are to reflect what we believe in anthropology about the human person. which means it creates a moral vision. Well, healthcare flows from that understanding.
Yeah.
So the church always has advocated that a person has a right to healthcare, a right to be cared for. And there can be complexities in those rights and obligations and duties, but generally a person has a right to be cared for, to be provided medical care. So for me, it's great to hear that the United States is revisiting its approach, its way of looking out, and how it aids other countries in caring for their own citizens. And for me, there's another social doctrine that comes to bear here, and that is actually several of them. What flows from the social doctrine is our responsibility to community, to family, to the larger community, the option for the poor, caring for those around us. This is very, very important. And I know we're going to get into this because the principle of subsidiarity actually comes into play here. So even though the United States may be wanting to offer assistance, how it offers that assistance is going to be very important.
Yeah. Do you think that I guess this is a discussion, this is something that's up for debate, but should the U.S. even be providing healthcare funds to the rest of the world, especially given the debt that the U.S. is in? Do you think this is something that the U.S. should definitely be going forward with? Do you think it's an area that there can be legitimate debate around whether or not this is a good idea?
Right. And there, what I would say, again, we're going back to the scripture. It's very, very beautiful. Whatever you do unto the least of my people, you do unto me. There is an obligation to the good and well-being of others. At the same time, the United States has an obligation to its own citizens first and primarily. So how do we care for our own people, following those basic principles that I know we're going to talk about, but also being concerned about others. This is the beautiful thing about our country, Colleen. God willing, this year I will have reached 100 countries in my visitations and representing HLI, which is unbelievable, but recognizing the good that our country does. Yes, there are a lot of things that we often speak about that are very disappointing, and there are reasons to be disappointed. But there is a tremendous good that the people of the United States, through its government and through its donation and charitable and taxes, is contributing to the good and well-being of our brothers and sisters around the world, not just in times of disasters. We often hear that, when there's an earthquake or a major typhoon or some major event that occurs, and all of a sudden you see all these millions and millions of dollars flowing from our country. That's the generosity of the American people.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, I hope, that never comes to an end.
Well, and one thing that struck me about the new healthcare plan, too, is that it's called the America First Global Health Strategy. And it does seem to be taking into account how can this plan also help benefit the American people. So it's not an either or. Either we take care of America or we be able to help fund healthcare plans abroad. It's okay, how can we structure this plan in such a way that we can help people in need, but then also be able to use that to benefit America? And I don't remember if it goes into this in particular, but one thing would be if you have countries where you have all these outbreaks of infectious diseases and then people come here, you could spread it in America. So I don't remember if the strategy goes into that detail or if it takes it from that angle, but that was an element that struck me.
Well, the principle of stewardship really comes into bear there as well. So not only the gospel value itself, but also the principle of being a steward of those resources. And those resources are given from the people here in our own country for their own well-being. I mean, this is what taxes were created for, with the mindset of the founding fathers, that it would be able to be used for the good, the common good. So we have an obligation toward caring for our own citizens, our own nation.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's not an either or. How do we also recognize our obligation toward our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world, especially those who are not as fortunate as us here in the United States, to be able to have access to proper health care. And so this is a good thing. So for me, when we started talking about this and realizing what I see already happening through various NGOs and various intergovernmental agencies that are working around the world, I can name all the negatives. At the same time, like I said, there's an opportunity to do something good here. And it's going to take real courage to really safeguard what the intention, but also what is the realization of those intentions.
Could you highlight what some of those negatives are then for our audience? Because we might have people who haven't listened to our episodes on the Kissinger Report or USAID who aren't as familiar with the negative implications of how the U.S. has been funding foreign aid.
Well, sadly, as we've talked about here before, whether we're talking about the Kissinger Report, which is that National Security Study Memorandum 200, NSMM 200, that we've talked about, and SM 200 that we've talked about, but just the way the policy has been by far within the Democratic administrations, Democrat-run administrations, has been to push funds abroad to promote, sadly, bioethical issues like contraception, abortion, euthanasia. Modern issues have been around gender dysphoria issues and surgeries and so forth. And these things are, again, disrespect human dignity. They disrespect, the rights of people to be respected. And sadly, it's been levels of influence of state policy, of being able to get governments to, if you will, adhere to the government of the United States. If you want to work with us, this is what you're going to have to do. And it's interesting that, that we're going to hear in a little while, you're going to bring it up about Secretary Rubio, in the Senate Secretary of State, in Kenya. And I think our audience needs to remember that it was Joe Biden, then Vice President Joe Biden, under the Obama administration, that basically threatened or offered the Kenyan government that if it would change its pro-life, pro-family stance, policy, constitution, that if they were willing to change that and embrace the mindset of what the administration wanted from the United States, the money, quote, would flow. So we have used leverage of money to exploit and manipulate many countries to embrace our very radical ideology of abortion, contraception, sterilization, euthanasia, you name it. So to hear currently a different approach, a matter of fact, as you know, we're talking just prior, both of us have not seen anything yet in any of the conversation about, quote unquote, reproductive technologies. And just for our listeners, that means contraception, abortion, sterilization, and now including, gender orientation and surgeries and medications and so forth. So, but we haven't seen that. So it's good if that were to remain out of the conversation, and really a legitimate conversation of what can the United States advocate for the good of our brothers and sisters in other countries regarding health care.
So before we get into what the U.S.'s current plan is, Father, if you got a chance to design the U.S.'s foreign aid structure when it comes to healthcare, what would it look like for you? Like, what approach would you take? Because you've traveled around the world, you've seen the great need in these countries. You are more familiar with how the governments work and how NGOs work over there. If you were to design one, what might that look like?
So if I were sitting down with Secretary Kennedy and Health and Human Services.
Kennedy,
and also with, and maybe even sitting down with J.D. Vance, the Vice President, and maybe the President, and we would sit down with the wheel of justice, because it's really the starting point. And for those who follow HLI regularly, you hear this quite often. You hear the social doctrine principles being advocated, put forward, and asserted. This is the starting point. So if I were designing, it's going to be built around the social teaching of the church, which, as I mentioned earlier, begins with a proper understanding of the human person. And so a moral vision begins to grow and to mature from that understanding. Then we leap out into the respect for the human person. And what does that mean when we say respect for the human person? So if I were designing, and that's using the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare services, we would hear in the very introduction what that looks like. Because we're dealing with a human person, there are certain duties and obligations toward that individual that can never be violated and that must always be respected. And so we can do no harm, nor can we advocate for any harmful thing to be done to that person. So that would be the starting ground. And building a conversation about what is human dignity and who is the human person and what is our duty to protect those rights and protect that inalienable right, that the human person has. And this is the challenge, because at the table, the people may not have that kind of vision. So this is what the Catholic Church has continually fought to assert. and won't relent. She will continue to do so because it's a fundamental truth. And when we follow that truth, then whether we're talking about healthcare or other approaches of how we advocate for the use of funding or how we advocate for aid, like Pope Benedict XVI talked about this so often, that it's very really an evil. It's immoral to use money to exploit other nations to forgo their life-loving, life-family cultures. And so these are challenges. And sadly, healthcare is on that front line.
Yeah.
It's that starting ground where so many of these immoral things are brought to bear. But it's also the same place where a moral view can be advocated for. And this is the view of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And this is important for us. So if I were building, that's what we talk about. So I would say to Mr. President and the Vice President and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, let's have a 6-month lesson here. That's where we should start, and these are also flow from the natural law, Colleen. So it's not just the Catholic, view. It is something we can observe very clearly from the natural law and understand that at one time the Hippocratic Oath, that doctors would take affirmed all the things that would be truly asserted by the Catholic Church in her own social teaching and moral view. So it's very important.
Yeah, I feel like I just keep hearing, like, one thing that's just been striking me over and over again since I started working here was how much foreign aid is used as the carrot and the stick, like when it comes to, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but when it comes to trying to get countries to give up their pro-life, pro-family, pro-marriage ideologies, is either you can receive this aid if you disavow your values, or if you pass something that, like, for instance, we did an episode on this back in 2023 when it happened. Uganda passed its super extreme anti-homosexuality law, and we had a whole discussion about what led to that. And all of these, I think it was World Bank and a number of different aid things were like, no, we're going to pull the funding. I remember at the time just thinking, this is crazy that this country is facing an extreme situation. They're taking extreme measures, which we were saying on the episode we didn't necessarily agree with. But the fact that all these other people are like, fine, you don't get any aid. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, this is, again, each of the pontiffs of modern history have addressed these issues. I would say probably most strongly was Pope Benedict XVI. Just speaking about the very fact, what is my moral duty as other nations toward their other brothers and sisters in other countries, but also the very fact that we should not be using leverage, exploitation, manipulation in any regard. We should be actually advocating for a good, and we should actually be supporting the need. And there is a responsibility toward my brother and sister in these countries. And whether we're talking about, as John Paul would talk about in Centesimus Annus, whether we're talking about how do we do distributive justice, how do we talk about the need for, let's just use an example, farming equipment. Here we're talking about healthcare. So how could we truly use the technology, the advancements in healthcare here in the United States, the resources we have through foundations and various governmental programs to actually advocate for the establishment of good healthcare in other countries. As many of our directors have said throughout the decades I've worked for HLI, that contraception doesn't change the situations in countries. It doesn't change systemic reasons why there's poverty, why there's no access to healthcare, why there's no access to work. I mean, abortion doesn't change any of those systemic issues. So what does change it is when we start with human dignity, we respect the rights of every individual to be respected, loved, and defended and served. And also, how do we begin to support local structure, calling for, one, let's talk about the fact that many governments, no different than our own, there's corruption. So how do we navigate waters and maybe using our own leverage to bring an end to corrupt systems that actually cause the abject poverty, that cause the lack of work, that prevent people from having access to infrastructures that are so needed and necessary, like clean water, healthcare, food access, all these various things. We could use our ability of leverage in a positive way and help other nations to achieve great goods for the good of their people, which also affects the common good of all peoples. So to me, that's where I see the current conversation on healthcare having potential. But it's going to take the courage to recognize that other countries, again, like our own, there's corrupt systems, there is true fraud, these things need to be dealt with so that we address the systemic issues, the structural issues, and then help a local government to help its local people. The principle of subsidiarity comes to mind. So instead of me going in as this nation and imposing myself upon another nation or setting up a kind of parallel system, which again is not helpful, there may be a need in an immediate situation for a certain dynamic that's unfolded, but it doesn't mean that should be the final procedure. So something I know you and I will continue to talk about. But those are the things, back to your question, how would I design it? That would be part of the conversation.
It's taking into account like subsidiarity.
We may never eradicate 100% corruption, but what are we doing to eradicate it?
Yeah. So eradicate corruption, use the principle of subsidiarity, and base this all on human dignity, basically, and the church's like principles of healthcare around that.
Right. And just that vision of the human person, that moral vision, because it really does, because it also shapes the principles that we're talking about, because it starts there. If you have a false understanding of human dignity, and then it falsifies all those other principles because it changes them, because you find circumstance, you begin to become arbitrary. There's nothing arbitrary in the church's understanding of the human person and our approach toward the human person. So, and neither should we have that arbitrary principle in how we deal with, whether it be healthcare, whether we're helping with infrastructures, or maybe assisting other governments to deal with their current situations. We're not arbitrary. We should not be.
Well, Secretary Rubio did a speech when he signed this first agreement of the new global health plan with the president of Kenya that I watched when I was preparing for this episode, and I thought it was a really good outline. So he was talking about how the U.S. is launching this new America First global health strategy. And how in the past, the previous system, he kind of summarized it loosely, like the U.S. tells a country, hey, we're going to go help you provide healthcare. The U.S. goes and finds an NGO. The NGO then takes a percentage of the cost for overhead, obviously. And then they go into this country and then they do their own thing, which isn't necessarily building upon whatever structures the current host country's government already has. So Rubio was pointing out, you end up with parallel systems because you have the NGO system and the current government system, and they might be providing duplicate services, or they might both be weak and they'd be stronger if they were together. And then what basically ends up happening is the host country doesn't really get a say in what healthcare is provided, or they only have a little bit of say. It's basically imposed by this NGO. And then the NGO, only a small percentage of the money that the U.S. is giving to the host country ever ends up helping the people. Right. So Rubio is saying that the plan from now on is to basically cut out the NGOs entirely, go directly to the governments of these other countries and work with them to put systems in place. And I didn't get a chance to read the full global health strategy itself because it was like 40 pages long. But I did search it for sexual and reproductive health or sexual and reproductive rights, and nothing was mentioned. And I was like, skim reading through it and trying to read the summaries of it. And it seems like the main focus is going to be on things like preventing HIV, malaria, polio, tuberculosis, kind of focusing more on stopping the spread of infectious diseases rather than these other contraception, abortion, etc.
Right.
And that aligns with Trump reinstating the Mexico City policy back when he became president. So no taxpayer dollars can be used for abortion globally. So it does seem to align with that same mindset that we already saw the Trump administration having.
Yeah, no, it's as we see it unfold and begin to, how is it implemented? I mean, the real challenge, of anything is, if I may, how do people? I mean, just in the country. Let's just say we're talking about Tanzania, right? So if Tanzania looks at the United States and its own government looks at our government, and looks at the way that we approach healthcare, the way that, and just using healthcare as the example, and that's what we're talking about, it may say to itself, well, we don't align with what your approach is. So that has to be the starting point. Is, I would say, as maybe I'm not overly familiar. I mean, I've been in Tanzania several times. I don't know all of its approach to healthcare. I do know, sadly, what's been affecting the country, like many other countries, Western influence, ideologies, and so forth. But if the government there, through its policies in healthcare and its approach to human life, truly advocates for life, and then we come in with our own flawed system and say, okay, we know better than you. So that's the first problem. Yeah. The real issue is understanding what is the system? What is the approach in that given country? But we still have to understand, what is our approach? And if our approach is, as you've been outlining and been reading, we've both been studying and still learning, is that if we are approaching healthcare from those principles of human dignity, human respect, advocating for the family as we should, and protecting the value of human life, protecting the beauty of conjugal love, and not imposing our own flawed values on another nation, then that can become a good. Because now we're supporting a good. But let's just say we have a country let's say that we're doing that good. Let's just kind of give ourselves a kind of an A on all the things I just mentioned. We're doing what is right. But we go to a country that's not.
Yeah.
So how do we understand what they're doing, their approach, and how can we now begin to influence that approach? So those are, to me, the starting points of conversation, because we have to be clear. We are going to work with you, but we're not advocating for any of these immoral positions.
Yeah.
We're not going to be in support of anything that contradicts. Now, that's a real challenge, because sadly, our country, is advocating for contraception. It advocates, depending on what state you're in now, right? Now, on the federal level, as we saw at the UN, the United States was saying that no one has a right to abortion. We should not be imposing that to any other sovereign nations. So if we can say, but we're doing it, sadly, in many of our states. So what will be, what's going to be the approach? And what will be included? Now, you just mentioned, and maybe that's one way to maybe move away from the other things for the moment, by looking at infectious diseases, looking at ways of, which again affects many people of many different nations, and people who are mobile. Obviously, it affects people all over the planet. So that could be the entry point. But then what happens going forward? So these are the kinds of things that would need to be unfolded, Colleen, as they go into time. Also, many of the institutions that the government of the United States may be working with in the governments of other nations are Christian or Catholic-run institutions.
Yeah.
So this could be a way of also, by working with those institutions that are directly working with the people of God, and support their local work, and advocate for them. For example, for just basic things we take for granted. If I broke my leg, I'll go to the emergency room. I'm going to get all the various technology will affirm whether or not I broke the leg, how badly I did, if I did, and what's going to be the procedure. Well, some of these countries have no CT scans, no MRI scans. They have, the technology is limited. I've been in these places. I've been in these clinics. I've seen with my own eyes. There is a way for us to really support an infrastructure, but we also need to help education, doctors, nurses, technicians. There are many ways of which the government in our country can really be of help, but we have to unmoor ourselves from the immorality and the immoral view of the human person. If we're really going to promote a good. Otherwise, we're just going to continue just to advocate for the garbage that we've done thus far.
Those are actually questions that I did have when I was reading about the health strategy, but I didn't have time to read the full document before we filmed. So I was trying to read summaries, and no one mentioned other things other than the infectious diseases. So I'm very curious to see if they have a plan for that. It literally could be in the plan, and I just didn't see it when I was trying to read through it and get an assessment for what was in there.
And I'm still studying too, so we're both looking at it. So we definitely will have a follow-up, and no doubt I will write something in Spirit and Life as more information becomes available. But it is interesting that it's in Kenya, where Secretary Rubio mentioned this, as I've already quoted, where then Vice President Biden, through the Obama administration, imposed upon a people a disrespect, for life and family. And so I find it very interesting that we're back on the same ground.
That was the first one that they signed it with. Yeah, that's interesting.
But I mean, having been in Latin America, having been throughout Asia, in Oceania, in lots of places of Europe, Africa, there is great need. And our country is an extremely, as I mentioned, can be a real advocate. If it's, and I like the fact that that maybe limiting NGOs. So I wouldn't say we shouldn't work with any NGO, because there are many Catholic organizations working that are non-governmental organizations.
That was one of my like questions for you about this is there a danger that like NGOs that respect the dignity of the human person who are approaching this from a Catholic perspective, who are like adhering to the Catholic morals,
yes.
Is it they're in danger that these groups could kind of have the baby thrown out with the bathwater and they'll also be cut out?
That's why it's going to be important to listen and to see what groups are working on the ground, and and which ones align themselves with that vision. And so, and there are several. I mean, again, I meet various groups on the ground. Some I wouldn't, say we should be working with because their principles are based in moral view, and so. But there are many groups working and advocating for great good and doing, yeoman's work in that great good. We shouldn't so easily just dismiss them. I understand, as you explained and what I've seen, why there's a hesitancy because of what you just gave so beautifully in the summary, and that is that the danger is that you're given to an NGO that might basically is taking a large percentage of those funds, and the funds that are needed to get to the ground, the clinics and so forth, is just dwindling as it moves down that food chain.
That seemed to be one of the issues. The other one was that there's no incentive to ever be able to pull out of the U.S. funding. If you're funding an NGO, that's a new line of business for them, and then they have no incentive to ever help the country become self-sufficient because they want to continue receiving U.S.
So it should
grants.
be a phase. The difficulty that this administration will face is the next administration.
Yeah.
So this is what happens, and so it really will, whenever it becomes the approach, is going to have to also find a way of becoming entrenched.
Do you think that this new approach has the potential to be really good because we're working with countries that are going to be able to retain the values of their own country? Or will aid just become another time we're just wielding this again and we're threatening to pull it if they
The danger is still there for manipulation, exploitation, fraud, all the various things are still there because you're still dealing with fallen human nature. So oversight, safeguards, policies, but then that becomes a danger too because the very people that you're sent to be safeguarding may themselves, can fall into the corruption because it is a tremendous amount. We're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about millions and billions of dollars of aid that are being funneled through these various groups. So it's going to require, again, back to a moral view. And that is a moral duty and holding people accountable, also phasing out. This is something that our founder, Father Marx, often did, when beginning affiliate relationships in different countries. We have several of our affiliates around the world that are self-sufficient, meaning they don't receive a grant from HLI. They receive other resources, in many other ways. But Father Marx identified that in some countries they were able to sustain themselves. But what he did is he, like anything else, you give seed money, you seed the ground, but you make a clear path where you're going to gradually begin to start fading and moving, so that basically they begin, who know the culture best, who know the situation best, know how to approach things best, and you're empowering them to do that. But you're always with them, and you're there for oversight. You're there for evaluation, and this is something in our own Catholic healthcare systems here in the United States that I find very important, and they are invaluable. Is always having audits where an outside source comes in. And it's important to identify who that outside source is. But I think of the National Catholic Bioethics Center is just one example that is often hired as an auditor to come into a Catholic system and look at their principles. How are they employed? Is their Catholic identity still being maintained? And on every level.
It's not just a financial audit, but also what sort of things is this money going towards?
So it's in a sense of if we're going to say, and I'm going to speak here as if we were a Catholic nation going to a Catholic nation, and we say to them, this is the agreement, but we realize that they're not maintaining their Catholicity in their approach. Then there has to be outcomes, responsibilities, and penalties to hold someone accountable. So these are what I love. What we've been talking about is on its face value, it sounds good. There sounds like there can be some great good achieved, but all these other things need to be established, and the people you put in positions of authority need to be of utmost credibility and held accountable and to others. So oversight is very important.
Yeah, no, that's one thing I'm very curious to see how the administration handles. Because on the one hand, I read this and I'm like, this is good. You're not relying on NGOs whose values you may or may not agree with. You're going directly to the countries, and the countries have more say. There's more subsidiarity. The countries, the governments hopefully know their people, know
Right.
their needs. If we can support them to best take care of their people, then that does seem to be a taking into account subsidiarity as a principle. But what I'd also would be concerned with is if you end up with governments who are corrupt,
Right.
what's going to happen? Do you end up with the same issue where the same percent of money is reaching the people
Absolutely.
because people in the government are all taking their cut?
Right.
And I'm curious, first of all, what the administration's plan is to have the oversight and ensure that this money is being used for what the US intends it to
Right.
be. And then my second follow-up question is, why didn't we use that same oversight with NGOs?
Right.
Like, if we had so much trouble doing that with NGOs, are we going to be able to do that with other governments? And
Right.
the Secretary Rubio's smart. I'm sure that the US has taken this into account and
Right.
has a plan, but that was one of the first questions that occurred to me is, what do you do when you have a corrupt government?
Well, over the last year, I've had the privilege of meeting several people working in the Trump administration
Mhm.
at various events.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed, by the people that are employed by the federal government
Mhm.
to be in various agencies, including HHS.
Yeah.
I've been really impressed. So good people with good principles can do great work.
Yeah.
Right? But it requires also support. It
Mhm.
requires oversight still, and all this. So there's great good. But you raised points about how we approach the NGOs. So I'm going to give an example. The government may be very corrupt, but you can work with local NGOs
Mhm.
that are not and that are doing very good work. So your point is well taken. So that's why I would not excuse or
Mhm.
just eliminate NGOs. I understand what they're saying. I
Yeah.
understand why. But at the same time, it may be your inroad is best through an
Mhm.
NGO, but you hold the NGO accountable for how it spends, how it
Mhm.
allocates, and oversee it. Make
Yeah.
sure that how can he keep administrative costs? Everyone has administrative costs. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't get away from it unless you're an organization that has millions and millions and millions of money coming
Mhm.
to you from donors that are overseeing the administrative side. In other words, they're paying for your administration
Yeah.
because they're donating toward it. But you
Yeah.
still have administration. You still got to produce all the various things that are needed for daily running. You can't ignore it,
Yeah.
but you can minimize it. You can do your
Mhm.
best. We have to hold them accountable. So we need to say, okay, for every dollar given, what are we saying that we really want to make sure that it gets to the ground?
Mhm.
And hold people to that. And then this is the thing, this is what, again, I love about the Catholic Church, because through its various charities, both nationally, internationally, and other ways it works, having been on different committees, I've seen how the church really fights for this
Mhm.
and has been very successful. And at the same time, because we're dealing with human nature, things can easily creep in when oversight is not present and we're
Yeah.
not holding people to those principles, or we attempt to circumvent principles, or we
Mhm.
compromise principles. It's always a danger.
Yeah.
But when we hold the ground, great things happen. So this is where I always say that, I just going to return to Pope Benedict when he talked about the political life.
Yeah.
Several times reading the Holy Father's comments that we need good, righteous people
Mhm.
working in government. We don't
Yeah.
need people running away from government because it's corrupt or whatever. And
Mhm.
we need good people entering into, but not being corrupted by the system,
Yeah.
but instead being an influence of change. And what we're talking about is a potential for that.
Yeah.
If we employ and empower good people, moral values to be upheld,
Mhm.
they could achieve a great good
Mhm.
if we're willing to do that. And that's why I come back to it. I'm not dismissing this at all.
No, I
I
think
see it as a great potential, but I also see the hazards,
yeah.
and have witnessed the hazards.
It might also be an extreme corrective that then could, like, as time goes on and the Trump administration figures out which governments aren't corrupt, and then which
Mhm.
ones there might be more issues. And if they decide to look into different NGOs and which ones aren't
Right,
corrupt, it is possible that when everything kind of shakes out, you'll end up with a smattering of some
right.
governments being funded themselves,
Yeah.
other NGOs going in, but I'm
Personally,
not
I
sure.
think I would start with a pilot program.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, as you do, and I think that's what you're talking about. I would pick, ones that you already see that
Mm-hmm.
are very good,
Yeah.
that you've had good experience with, that you have good tests models from, and maybe pick 5, pick 10. Start something that you can manage, and then and build a pilot program, and begin to build a conversation and learn from it. Learn its problems, learn its good, and what can be stronger, and really build on it. And also, I think it's good to found boards. But board members are just like anyone else. They can be people easily that can be guided in the wrong direction. So we have to hold people accountable. But having other people, I think, what the president has done, for example, by inviting people like Cardinal Dolan, Bishop Barron,
Yeah.
and I forget, it was Bishop Paprocki, I believe, was invited to be I believe it's on the issues of religion. So by bringing various people on board to be an advisor, a consultant, you're bringing also people who bring a different vision. They bring insights from experience, and they can offer guidance. They obviously can't tell the president or whoever's going to be in charge of those various policies and procedures, but at least you're bringing people on that are not going to tell you always what you want to hear.
Yeah.
They will be honest with you.
Don't want a
they
yes
will
man.
confront things, and I think that's very, very important. And bringing people of credibility and people who have shown that they're credible and honest and straightforward and have oversight. These are very, very important. I've always noticed that, and it's just human nature, that if I knew that you were coming to my house, I'd clean the house, straighten it all out, because I know you're coming.
Yeah.
But if you were to ring my doorbell, you might find I got shoes all over the place. I got towels over here, because I was not prepared.
Yeah.
And what happens is they announce, we're coming to evaluate you. And of course, they're going to clean the house. They're going to get all the right people to say the right thing.
Yeah.
So it really does require in a sense, the filtering that begins with a proper understanding of the human person. That there are certain things that we will not advocate for, we will not tolerate, we will never give permission for. And if we find out that you're doing things that are in contradiction to these core values, funding ends immediately. So there was hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And also, to me, that helps NGOs. It also helps governments. And so, I mean, I can see, I'm thinking right now of some of the African countries I've been, some of the Asian countries. When you get into the rural communities, Colleen, they're limited access to healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, our poorest brothers and sisters, families in rural communities, we take for granted in the United States that a general population has access to an urgent care, an emergency room, a clinic. And none of our clinics, at least that I have seen in the United States, ever compare to the clinics I see. I meet admirable people, great doctors, great nurses, but they have very little resource.
Yeah.
And, and I was shown one just recently that I thought to myself, I want to make sure I don't fall down any stairs. I don't get any lacerations. I don't get anything, because and I'm not trying to be judgmental. That's all they have. But the rooms were just, they were just unkept.
Yeah.
But that's all they have. So this could be a way that to bring good, reputable, moral healthcare to our brothers and sisters in many parts of the world that don't have it. But my concern still is, well, how do we define healthcare, Colleen?
Yeah.
Because if somehow, as we know, remember, abortion is considered healthcare.
Yeah.
And so these things can easily creep in, even though they're not intended, even though they may not even be explicitly mentioned. Yeah. They can easily creep in. And that is why we saw that under the Biden administration, the changing of terms. We've seen this sadly the medical group associations, trying to manipulate terminology about implantation and fertilization. Yep. We've seen it, we know it. Yeah. So that's the danger. So I would just say, to Secretary Rubio, how about you bring HLI on board and maybe the National Catholic Bioethics Center and a few other very, very solid, reputable groups, and we can be your filters and help. That might be a good thing. So We're putting our rally call out there.
I volunteer as tribute. Yeah, I will say I have been impressed with just different little things that I've seen this administration do regarding like the Mexico City policy, the renewing its membership in the Geneva Convention Declaration, which I don't know that much about, but it seems to be a pro-life document. And then I noticed in the recent national security strategy, on the very last page, it was talking about Africa. And the first line said that for far too long, the American policy in Africa has focused on providing and later on spreading liberal ideology, which I don't know if the Trump administration was like meaning to refer to things like the Kissinger report, but that was how I took it. It was the National Security Study Memorandum saying that for national security purposes, we must promote reduce the population, et cetera, and family planning policies, basically. But I don't like that term. And then to have another national security strategy.
So maybe, Colleen, they were listening to your podcast.
That would be. I would love that.
Very possible. They're out there listening, and so you never know the influence. And we did put a few rally calls out there saying, "Hey, I'd be more than happy to explain this a little more detail."
Rescind the Kissinger report.
And obviously, HLI. I know I've written several times on the impact, and I've called out the administration both in President Trump's first administration, and I did it again in the very beginning of his administration to denounce the Kissinger report.
Yeah.
And to call it out and to reject it. So
this might be a soft rescinding. We're not sure, but it was a hopeful. It was at least recognizing that the U.S.'s security strategy in Africa for far too long has been focused on not actually being helpful.
And I know you can put this in the show notes. I know you will. I think it'd be good because we do talk about it often, and I know that our listeners who listen often are familiar with the document. But there could be someone listening today that's not familiar with the Kissinger report. That would be very, and to understand that what Colleen explained is that under the Kissinger era, this is under President Nixon. Yeah. So in the 1970s, early 1970s, in understanding that they used a language and basically said that for the security interest of the United States, that certain countries, populations around the world where we need access to resources, we need to depopulate basically those communities, and so that we can have greater access to their resources, which help provide stability to the United States' security. Now that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, but that's helpful.
But it's important for people to understand that approach is still in existence. And let's be honest, right now we have a fertility crisis, global fertility crisis, and this is going to the opposite is going to impact security. Yeah. Because the inability of a country to sustain itself, to protect itself, or to even fund itself, to take care of its own infrastructure, social programs, healthcare is an example. Yeah. So, and with that, I would say because of that. My other danger, Colleen, and I'll toss out there, which is not in the document that we've reviewed thus far. Where does euthanasia come into this? Assisted suicide, especially as we have nations that are becoming critical in mass because of an aging population. Are we going to, as a country, say that we're going to allow funds to be utilized for that or not? And of course, our answer would be no. Should be no. I would hope not. Right? Yeah. But it could easily find its way in. Yeah. So these are the dangers. So here, most of us would be thinking, all right, a clinic, scrapes, bruises, stitches, an x-ray, a broken leg, a cast. Those are things that are just ordinary day-to-day care, a cold, the flu, those are things that need to be obviously speak for themselves, but we're also speaking on all the other layers that come aboard. So what about, how do we approach, a couple who comes struggling with infertility? Yeah. What's going to be our approach to that? We use IVF? Sadly, under the current administration, I've been very much in disagreement with President Trump on this, on the issue of in vitro fertilization. I'm sorry, the president is wrong on this. And so, and I say that with great respect. I wish I could sit down with him and talk to him about it. I think it's just a lack of understanding on why IVF is not right. Surrogacy is another issue because now we're talking back to IVF. Is that going to be part of this? You know, and we can't say because we're only dealing with poorer countries. Sorry, it is in poorer countries as well.
The real question is, how do you define healthcare, and how is the U.S. defining healthcare when it's putting these programs in place? And is it narrow enough to exclude all the moral issues, or could anything kind of get lumped in under it? So it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. I'm excited for you to review this document more and learn more about it so we can have a more in-depth conversation about the details. But I did want to just kind of bring it up so our audience is aware that the U.S. has this new policy in place and some of the potential good that we see as well as some of the potential dangers and
maybe we ought to
questions.
be talking to our congressmen and our senators that that we have access to talk about this and to be supportive and to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
I haven't seen from what I've read thus far, and again, I've only put my little toe kind of into the pool of reading the document and looking at some of the summaries, but what people are going to be involved. Is it only going to be, is it going to be the Secretary of State that's going to spearhead this? I doubt. I would think it's going to be Health and Human Services that are going to be charged with, one, organizing and creating this opportunity because it falls under Health and Human Services.
Even if it's foreign policy?
It could, foreign policy. I mean, I said the Secretary of State will definitely be involved, but will he be the one directing programs and what program, what is it going to look like?
How much will we be involved, honestly, and how much are we working okay, to this other government, you give us your plan, we give it the okay, and then you go fund it yourself. I'm not sure what their
because it hasn't been outlined yet. So, but wouldn't it be wonderful to be on that committee? To me,
you're just volunteering for all the jobs today,
I would be
Father.
very interested in understanding, because I do believe, as we began, that our country does noble work, and our country and its people are noble people.
Yeah.
We are a good people, and we are a generous people, and we are a very concerned people about others. And there's always room for growth in that. But as a whole, we are a good people, and we mean well. But there are people in certain areas of influence and responsibility that manipulate that good to their advantage for the wrong reasons. And we've seen story after story with that. And so we have to understand fallen human nature. And even people of right intent and good intent could start something with the right intention, but not have the means to see it through. And so we need to really create the safeguards, make sure the filters are there, make sure we empower the right people, and that we are holding other entities responsible, because that's also being a steward, that money given to the federal government comes from your pocket and mine. It's the taxes of the American people. And our government has a moral duty to be stewards of that and to ensure that those funds are being used in accord with the vision of the United States people, the American people, but also to hold other people accountable for what they've done. And if they have done something wrong, hold them accountable, help them to change. Maybe they didn't know, who knows? But this is important. So dangling something out there alone is not enough. And just saying, we're going to give this to you is not enough. I have seen it, and I've seen people dance on the edge of a knife, trying to say that we'll take the money, but we're going to work with the group that's really immoral, doing that we don't agree with, but they're doing something good that we want to work on that, but because they're already there. And I always say, well, no, why don't you found your own entity or find a reputable group that holds all of your values and work with them? Why work with this entity? Because you're dancing on the edge of possible scandal, causing scandal. So I don't want to sidetrack us, but that's very real. It's the
same argument people use for Planned Parenthood, where they say, oh, Planned Parenthood funds essential health care that needs to be provided. And yes, Planned Parenthood funds like STD testing. Most of the stuff that they fund or they say they fund, it's very minimal or not at all. That people say, like small mammograms percentage. And prenatal care and stuff like that. But people use that argument of, oh, they do some good stuff and abortion is just part of what they do, but money's fungible. So even if you're, in theory, the federal government is giving money to Planned Parenthood to fund STD testing, et cetera, and not abortion or contraception, well, Planned Parenthood's then able to put that much more money towards abortion and contraception. So you just have to be careful when you're funding groups.
And I would just say to those listening, come with me in the mission field, and I'll show you what Marie Stopes and Planned Parenthood and their ilk are doing. Very rare do you ever see anything offered to a woman who goes to those clinics. And it could be a man, it could be an STD test can be offered. But the idea, those are rare. What you do find is contraception, injectables, and even though they may not directly do abortion in that particular clinic, they will definitely refer you to where it will be done in a major hospital or somewhere else where it will be done. So it's important to see. That's why I'm glad we're talking about it, just to highlight the dangers. And when there are so many, and that's why I do agree with Secretary Rubio, that maybe the best way is to go directly to the source and work specifically with that entity.
Yeah.
But the safeguards must be the same.
Yeah.
Because as you already highlighted, are equal. The
There's
dangers are still there.
There's corruption everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that there's great potential here. And so I'll be looking for my invitation and waiting for a phone call from Secretary Rubio that I've been invited to be on the filter committee.
Father, you started this episode talking about how busy your 2026 is. I guess you're not busy enough.
There's always room if we can promote a great good. Actually, it might help me not have as much work if we promote the good.
This is true. Stop the problems right at the source, and then there's less.
Exactly.
Still a lot to do in the mission field, but less evil to fight back against.
That's right. That's right.
I'm thankful for having this conversation, Father. We can definitely return to it more as you and I both do more research into this topic and as more information comes to light. But I wanted to at least kind of throw it out there so our audience is aware that this is happening, aware of what the new strategy is, at least, the outline of what it's going to look like. And as soon as I saw that the NGOs were cut out and that the goal is to work directly with governments, I saw some potentially really good signs there, recognizing, because just having heard so many stories here of all the problems that NGOs have created in spreading contraception, abortion, et cetera, in the name of healthcare, the fact that we are working directly, especially with so many governments in Africa where the people of Africa hold very pro-life and pro-family values, I have a lot of hope that this could be good if it's done effectively. So...
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I look forward to talking more about it because I'm already thinking of, if I were to be called, what groups could be working on the ground. And I can think of 5 immediately off the top of my head that would be very good groups on the ground in the countries I've been in.
Who you can trust.
You can trust that are in those communities, because really it's going to be, and I'll just close with that, it's going to be not only your own vision, but ensuring the people that are going to be employed or that you're working with carry your vision. So that means the nurse, the doctor, the midwife, the technicians, all the various other components that make up healthcare.
Yeah.
It's not just getting a CT scanner, it's all the people that are employed, ensuring that they carry that vision. And that's what I'll just end. That's what I love about our Catholic faith. Is that I can go to a Catholic institution predominantly anywhere around the world. And I can be confident, I pray, confident that I will be respected and that my rights as a human person will be upheld and that no one will disregard that. Now, I wish I can say that 100%, but I can definitely say, in the very, very high 90s, that would be happening. Sadly, because of human nature and because of problems. But this is what all about our faith, so whatever entity I enter, I know that the people there are meant to carry that vision. It's still a challenge within our own systems because we have our problems too, but there's opportunity. So I thank you for the chance to talk about this. I look forward, and I know that maybe you'll maybe put some of that documents for the people in the show notes to have, so
I'll
they can go back and read them.
Rubio's speech and the full document of the new healthcare strategy, and I'll also put a link to our ebook on the Kissinger report because
that'd be great.
It's fabulous. It was one of my favorite projects that I helped work on, was putting that together, just because it's a topic that I'm so interested in and I think is very important for people to be aware of. So Amen. I'll put a link to that as well in the description.
Well, thank you, Colleen, very much. Great to be with you. Hope to be doing it soon.
Yes, you as well, Father. And to all of our audience, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe so that you can get new episodes every Thursday. Check out that ebook that I mentioned and the links that I'm putting in the description. And as always, keep on living the culture of life. God bless.